Josh, I wanted to give you, if you're okay with, if you don't mind me bumping in here.
Go ahead, man.
I wanted to give you a scenario because I want to make up this scenario because whenever a story drops, you get all of us go to the story like flies, and we formulate our two opinions. Mm-hmm. And rather than have my opinion, people look at my opinion differently because of the bias, I'm going to give a scenario, and I want you to tell me what you think. Okay, here's the scenario. It's announced later this year that Sony is acquiring Square Enix for $7 billion. All right?
Okay.
So that means all of Square Enix, Final Fantasy, it's all going to be exclusive to Sony.
Okay.
If, let's say, I don't want all those games to not be playable on Xbox, but if I come into the Discord, I come into the internet conversation and I say, well, I think it's fair because Microsoft acquired Bethesda for $7 billion. I think it's even. I think it's fair. Do you think I'm fair to say that? Or, because there's going to be people going, oh man, Activision Blizzard. Everybody blocked Activision Blizzard, and everybody hated when Microsoft wanted to buy Activision Blizzard, but then Sony, little Sony that gets everything they want, they get to acquire Square Enix for $7 billion. This is bullshit. You can't tell me the industry's fair. If I come in there and say, no, guys, I think it's fair, because I don't want them to acquire Square Enix, but if I come in there and say, well, I think it's fair, I mean, Microsoft acquired Bethesda for $7 billion, do you think I'm right and that it is fair in that sense? Or do you think they have a good point that it's not fair Microsoft? Because my point is, Activision Blizzard's this huge conglomerate, $70 billion, versus small, I don't know what Square Enix would sell for. I chose $7 billion because that's what Microsoft acquired Bethesda for. I think, and it's my friend Michael who brought this up, actually, and I thought it was a good point. That's why I'm bringing it up here. I think that's comparable. So I would say that Sony acquiring Square Enix for $7 billion is not a straight-up one-to-one, oh, look, they were unfair to Microsoft, but they're fair to Sony. What do you think? Where would your stance be if that was the news story?
I think
say whatever you really feel.
The way you phrased it, I would definitely agree with you that it would be ridiculous of Xbox fans, because, and I would agree that would happen. Like, that would absolutely be a situation where they'd go, oh, okay, look at Sony being the bullies. There would be something like that, but doesn't it already kind of feel that way? Because I feel like if you remove
they're the bullies?
I mean, I do think they play dirty, and I don't blame them. If you win, you great. That's why it's great having three different. Look at
it this way, Josh. They came in with their first system and won the generation, and it wasn't close. They annihilated. They made Sega leave the market, and N64 sold like 1/5 of the PS1, and they've technically they've never lost really.
Got big old cocks, you know what? And they're swinging and slinging.
The PS3 they sold more PS3s than the 360. That's the thing that's crazy, even.
Yeah. So I mean, no, I feel like people would still have that issue. And I mean, I look at the Square Enix situation now, and it's like, it wouldn't surprise me, but it already feels like that's happening. We know factually now that they paid to keep Final Fantasy VII Remake, like, over there, to not get it to Xbox, because originally, guys, it was stated that this was going to be a timed exclusive to Sony. So Xbox fans were like, cool, can't wait to play that. Now Xbox fans are like, wow, I remember when that was a conversation. So, but I mean, and you look at things like the Kingdom Hearts series, stuff like that. That's playable. Past Final Fantasies are playable on the Xbox ecosystem.
Yeah.
But you look at games like the remake, you look at like FF16. These are not games that you can play on the Xbox, as far as I know. 16's a PS exclusive, correct?
16 appears to be a permanent, lifelong exclusive.
So it looks
insane.
like it seems like they're already in that conversation sans the announcement. So it's like, I'm already kind of like personally used to that. But yeah, I would see people get pissed about that, and I think it would be unfair. But at the same time, the one thing, and it's not really a great defense, to be honest, but the one thing I feel like Xbox would have done with Activision Blizzard is, for a lot of people, there's a lot of games that they put out in their history that are like dead IPs now, that I feel like Xbox would have absolutely went and resurrected and brought back and sort of got those things going again, or pumped some life into them, had them pumped life into them. But at the same time, that's me on the hopium that doesn't actually know that for a fact, and that's just big,
Josh,
broad,
I actually just
speculative.
I think I thought of the best defense against my own case, actually, while you were talking. The only thing I could say to give the Xbox, people a fair shake is, Well, the difference is Sony was already astronomically the lead in the gaming industry. And then they were just allowed to go off and acquire some of the biggest IPs of all time in Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts, Dragon Quest. And the difference being that Microsoft was distant third. You know what I mean? Like, if monopolies and competition is the conversation, the best argument you could present to me as an Xbox fan is, well, Xbox was already way behind. Why does Sony need to acquire this gigantic franchise conglomerate itself, even though it's way less than Activision Blizzard, when they're first place? So that's one good argument.
Why? Because at that point, then they're shifting the focus, and they're saying now it's the Mamba mentality of now I'm gonna. Well, I should say the inverse of the Mamba mentality of now I'm gonna do what Xbox is doing. Sony's already doing what they're doing, and they're winning, and they're doing great. And see, this is the difference. Part of the reason I love Xbox is because I love the mentality that Phil sort of conditions sort of everyone to believe with this umbrella. He like sprinkles down this sort of like a very positive experience of like, you know, when he comes out and he's like, hey gamers, gaming, you know. I love that it's about the passion for the video games. I love that look, behind the scenes, guys, I mean, Phil wants to kick ass. He wants to own. Like, I'm not gonna say he
has a few times. He's already kicked ass a few times.
I'm not gonna say he necessarily he has this perspective, even though he denies it about, you know, wanting to be number one. I'm sure he wants that, like, as a personal goal, because that's a huge success story. But I don't think that's necessarily the vision he has. But that's what I love about Xbox is you see them when you look at the socials. There's a lot of times, like, Sony will have a big release, and you'll see the Xbox Twitter go and say, like, congratulations, blah, 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 and Sony will be like, thank you. Or you'll sometimes you see the inverse, right? But Xbox has this more, like, look, we care about people being able to play games in many places as possible, however possible. The accessibility is a big important factor, and that's not something that's being offered elsewhere. We've already really talked about that. However, when you look at Sony is definitely, I mean, pretty much from that reveal that Brian was talking about with the PS4, they pretty much put their cards on the table and said, we're Sony. People, you know who the f we are. You want us, come get us. And they've been playing dirty ever since. And I hate that, but I also respect it because it's like, I very much, like, Xbox, I think to a lot of people, Sony people would say Sony probably plays the game a little bit aggressively. I think the argument could be made passively in a way too, because they're so successful. They don't need to necessarily get aggressive, but they're a little bit more aggressive. Xbox plays the game a little bit more passively, and I think a lot of people are tired of that. And I see people out there, that are like, you know, they gotta go after this, they gotta do that, everyone's saying what they think they should or shouldn't do. We probably said that numerous times in this too, but like, I still like fundamentally that they're more kinder, that they're more compassionate. You know, like, they don't want to shit on Sony when Sony is succeeding. Like, behind the scenes, sure, especially with this acquisition. But you see publicly, like, there is at least a kind gesture out there of, you know, extending, like, congratulations. A lot of times Phil will say that stuff on Twitter and whatnot. Not necessarily just tweeting, like, oh, hey, Sony, congratulations. Hey, Jim Ryan, or hey, such and such Insomniac Games. He'll go tweet them. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference. Yeah. And I know
agree,
that probably
Sony is by far the least humble.
Yeah. But I also think, too... Yeah. That what Sony's doing is something I just wish Xbox had so much that it makes me sad about Xbox, because Sony, when they come out in 2020 with the PlayStation 5, Brian is talking to me about how Final Fantasy VII Remake is not even a conversation for Brian yet. But the PS5 comes out, and Brian's mainly getting it for Demon's Souls, and if I'm not mistaken. And Demon's Souls, to me personally, I haven't even played it, but it looks like the most beautiful looking game I've seen to this date. And Xbox has put out some beautiful games, but you get into like you get under the hood of like Sony's games, and you can tell, like Brian said earlier, like they care about their developers and they trust these guys to put out these good games. I think Xbox does that too. Like, they trust them. They don't want to take their agency away to conceptualize new ideas, and they don't want to relegate these studios to just pumping out the same type of game with a different face on it, you know? But the difference is that Sony has found the secret to success, and they've continued to let that happen. and let that flow that same way. And they've not changed stuff up too differently. Xbox had that. Like, the Xbox landed and it was good. And it had a lot of foundation and room to grow. You could only go up from there. It wasn't a case of like, this is DOA or like you've already plateaued. The 360 comes out and they build up from there. The Red Ring of Death doesn't even stop that console from being a success. You go watch movies around the time of that generation, every person in a movie, like you look at a freaking Seth Rogen movie or something, dude, they had 360s. They didn't have PlayStations. Now it's different.
Disturbia. Shia LaBeouf's playing Ghost Recon on it.
There you go, yeah. So, but by the end of the 360 generation, stuff was changing, right? They were getting to, the Kinect was coming out. You were starting to see the IPs that had gotten them to that point were starting to get milked a little bit. Like, here comes 343 now, and we're going to put out Halo 4, and Gears puts out Gears of War Judgment, and it doesn't go over well, and oh look, here's this Fable game on the Kinect and stuff like that. So it doesn't feel like it at the time, I think, in retrospect, but you start to see where, like, there might be trouble in paradise in a way. And then the Xbox reveal comes out, and it's like, it's out front and center. Their pants are down. And we've been trying to recover since then. And, you know, counting that gen, 2 gens later, and 3 years into this one, enough is enough, you know? Like, it's time to put up or shut up. And it's just, like, I don't want to see Xbox go away. I don't think that's going to happen. But, like, I can see a future where I do a complete 180 and switch to where I buy a PlayStation 6 day one, and I buy my Xbox 900 just to play their exclusive games, and I can get them through Game Pass. So I pay $500 for the console, and then I just go pay $15 a month